Back of the room, if you could try to keep it down during the discussions. I know that's sort of become like a social area back there, but please keep it at a whisper as your voice does carry up here. If you've been coming to some of these Hope conferences for a while, you will recognize this hat because Rinderman wears it to every conference that he comes to. He's the involuntary leader of the Church of Wi-Fi, which I believe is some kind of tax-deductible haven of some sort. In Canada, correct. This is How Do I Pwn Thee? Let Me Count the Ways by Rinderman.
Okay. So can everybody hear me okay? All right, I see some thumbs up. Okay. I am Renderman. Many of you probably know me, or I probably owe a drink to, in which case I won't be seeing you later. I will warn you, I don't think my dinner's agreeing with me, but I do have a bucket over here, so if I do make a quick run, it's nothing personal. This talk is where I start getting literary with my titles. It's called How Do I Pwn Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. Now, it all started out with a conversation I had with a guy named Dino from South Africa at a convention in Toronto called Sector. We both kind of noted that the workforce, the business workforce that's out on the road a lot is increasingly mobile, increasingly using and relying on wireless devices. And most of these people, by and large can be, as dumb as toast. So there's an awful lot of opportunities for these people to, make your BOFH job kind of difficult because they're away from, your ability to smack them around and enforce the rules. They can disable things, they can do stupid things. And it's actually a rather terrifying when you look at it, how easy these people can usurp all of the security measures you put in place. This is by no means an exhaustive list. If you have any suggestions at the end, I'd love to hear them. And as part of full disclosure, I will say that there is probably not any terribly new wireless content in here. There's, it's just sort of an accumulation of everything. Probably some things that, angles you haven't thought of before, but just in case anyone was expecting, some brand new 0 day or something like that. Sorry. Meet Bob. Bob works for Widgets International selling widgets. Fancy that. He travels to customer sites, he's always flying everywhere. He's the guy who knows every article in the in-flight magazine and, the kind of guy you see at all these airports that's, he's got the 500 club pass to get into the lounge and everything like that. Whether you're sitting back in cattle class and everything, he's getting, samosas up in first class. The kind of guy you just like to hate. Is it me? How many of you actually work with anybody like this who has a sales force like this? Wow, that's a fair bit. As you probably know, Bob can be your worst IT nightmare. He kind of likes to think himself tech savvy. Oh, look at this fancy ass laptop I've got. I can, oh, it's nice and shiny and big. I have absolutely no idea what's in it, but, look at it, it's shiny. Really, he just knows enough to get access to his porn. That's about it. That's all he really cares about, too. And he can be your worst nightmare. In this particular case, our fictitious Bob is going to be our worst case scenario. The absolute worst possible user you could possibly imagine at your business. So let's pwn Bob. We're not going to touch him, we're not going to, punch him in the face, steal his wallet or anything like that. We're just going to say, okay, just for instance, you're a bored hacker going to a conference in New York or Norway or some such case. And you're sitting in the departure lounge. You've got an hour and a half to kill. You see this guy across from you pounding away on his laptop, looking like he's so important, Bluetooth headset in. Yeah, when a hacker gets bored, bad things tend to happen. So let's kind of say, let's see what we can do to him. First and most obvious, he's sitting there working on his laptop. So you've got a laptop, tons of private company information that not only do you now have to worry about border searches for all that information, the guy sitting across from you can be doing just as many bad things. Bob will connect to anything, hotspots at train stations, airports, hotels, wherever. the Linksys global network, I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Yeah. And I'm not saying by any means that there's 500 networks, many of which are open around this hotel, but he's the kind of guy that would take advantage of this. One of my favorite stories actually is, despite this being a felony, it was a what the heck? There was a new magazine article where they're giving an interview with I think it was Steve Ballmer, and they were at a hotel for some conference or something like that, and the hotel didn't have free Wi-Fi, or they didn't have Wi-Fi in the hotel. So they're trying to get some work done. They're trying to figure out how to get online, and one of the guys calls Bill Gates and says, "Hey, I got an open access point over in my room. Come on down." So there's like some of the top executives going on and using some bakery's access point to get onto the corporate VPN to get into Microsoft. I'm like, here it is, the richest man in the world just admitted to committing a felony. It's like there's no justice in the world. As I'm sure many of you know, hotspots generally do not encrypt. If you're connecting at a T-Mobile hotspot, a Starbucks or AT&T or whoever they're using now, they're not encrypted. It's a service, but it's a service that anybody can see. If it's clear text, anybody can see it. They can see what you're transmitting, unless it's like SSL or VPN or something like that. The other thing is, they're also free to inject, because, I can see what you're looking for and do interesting things to respond to that. If you're not using a VPN at one of these hotspots and you've got company data going over it, you're screwed. You're going to get boned. You've got company secrets going through the air to anybody within range. Bob probably doesn't know this. Bob is probably more worried about the fact that he can, get his email from his wife or kids, or access to whatever porn sites he's got with him, and not thinking about the company's assets. He's not thinking about the fact that he's got this, database sitting there on an open share on his computer. That, oh, gee, he doesn't have a firewall. Anybody who's on the local LAN, also connected to the access point, can now start browsing his shares and, oh, gee, look, customer list, costing for products. This could be very interesting to other people, particularly if you happen to be sitting in an airport departure lounge and you see your competition sitting across the way. Right. The usual man-in-the-middle attacks, password snarfing, all that's applicable. But a really telling example is at DEF CON 15 last year, there was about 20 access points a couple of days before the conference. There was about 20 access points that had the SSID of the hotel's network. By Saturday night, there was 150. Who's going to play Russian roulette with that? How do you know that the access point you're connecting to is actually the hotel one and not somebody just doing something nasty? Most of these hotspots don't do any authentication. They might ask you for a username and password, but there's nothing verifying, no certificate coming back saying, yes, this is me, this is an actual hotel network, no verification or anything like that. And at best you might see, oh, it's a MAC address that's written on the sheet in your room. Well, that could be easily spoofed too. You also have to think, the attacker is on your local network. He's sitting right next to you for all intents and purposes. If you don't have a firewall up or anything like that, it's like the guy sitting in the cubicle next to Bob back at Widgets International. So all the attacks that usually would be mitigated by firewalls suddenly apply. And that's not even to speak of things like the driver vulnerabilities that have come out recently that, who knows what kind of fresh hell could be unleashed with that stuff. When I was in Norway for a conference back in February, I had basically had the worst travel experience possible, between canceled flights, airplanes having to turn around because the pilot comes on and says, yeah, we've got a broken plane, we need to get a new one, after you've been flying for an hour in this thing. Just wasn't a pleasant experience. So I'd been up for like 36 hours or so before I got to the conference, and with the time zone change, I got there just at the very beginning of the day. So I hung around. And you get tired, you get punchy. Let's start doing some experimentation. So I wanted to see if other countries, because I'd only experimented in North America, I wanted to see if other countries and continents had, enough wherewithal to realize that maybe they shouldn't be using open networks at conferences where there's, half the speaking rosters known hackers that go to DEF CON and under assumed names and everything like that. So, let's see if these people really figure it out. So I fired up AirPwn, which I don't know if many of you know, but essentially when you make a request for, say, Google, you get the HTTP GET request for the image on the front page. Now, that'll take like 200 milliseconds to get there, 200 milliseconds back. If I'm in the same room as you and you're running on an unencrypted network, I can see this GET request, and with any luck, supply my own image back, fudging that it's coming from Google, and feed it back to you. And your browser says, oh, this must be the image that I was expecting, and put up whatever image it is. This is the first image I started injecting. I don't know if you can tell, but that's a 10-foot kayak and a 12-foot shark. If that doesn't say pwned, I don't know what does. Hardly anybody noticed. Most people didn't actually look at the image. They just saw this blue thing. They didn't really look at it. They didn't spend any time on it. Just a lot of like, okay, what's going on? Am I getting corrupted images? What's going on? Now, at this conference, they had 3 networks running. One was running open, one was running WEP, one was running WPA. Now, I was monitoring traffic for the 2 days of the conference. I only saw 2 logins to the WPA network, and one of those I had verified was actually for maintenance, to go in and double check it was actually running because nobody was connecting. So everybody was using the open network. And okay, after the first day, let's up the ante, let's see what, if these people will actually figure out that maybe somebody could possibly be screwing with their network. Grabbed the camera, took a picture, started up, injecting that. They got the hint, and I didn't get punched. There were some people coming up to me who, they've got their corporate webmail open, and they're looking at it like, what are you doing? How are you getting into my laptop? What are you doing to me? Like, what did I do to you? And I'm like, come to my talk, I'll explain. And actually, Roger Dinkeldine from the Tor project had asked me to continue doing this through the rest of the weekend because it fit very nicely into his talk about Tor and how it can actually be used to mitigate against something like this. But in this particular case, I'm just injecting my face. What else could I inject? JavaScript, change DNS entries, well, the classic one that AirPwn originally started with was injecting Goatse at DEF CON. So, yeah. Yeah, that one actually confused a lot of people. People were thinking it was DNS poisoning or something weird like that. They didn't think actual, literal man in the middle through the air. And the fact that this is a valid attack vector still is kind of scary, that people are using an open network. Karma is another one that can turn around and bite you. I don't know is everybody familiar with Karma? A little bit? Okay. Essentially what it is when a laptop with Windows or whatever is trying to connect to, is out of range of its home networks. There's that preferred list that it says, automatically connect to whenever you're in range. Well, it's sitting there beaconing, looking for these networks. Karma says, oh, that's me. Here's an IP, here's how to connect, and generally it will. A Windows laptop will. So now I've got a direct connection to you because now I'm on the local network. Hotspotters does the same thing, but it emulates pay-for-play access points, presents your nice login page and everything like that. Metasploit has some new tools for this sort of stuff. Simple Nomad has 3 years ago had a talk at ShmooCon 3 years ago. Had a talk called Hacking the Friendly Skies, where he pointed out, you're at 30,000 feet inside a big metal tube away from any other sources of interference. Yes, the stewardesses tell you to turn off your wireless, but that idiot in first class that's Bob sitting there typing away at a letter or something like that doesn't necessarily listen to that or necessarily know how to turn off the wireless. So he's sitting up there broadcasting, looking for networks. There's no way in hell he's going to find them at 30,000 feet. Except for the guy back in economy who fires up Karma or something like that and connects up to the guy in first class. Well, now he's browsing his shares. Oh, this guy works for this company. Oh, here's a customer database. Oh, here's a memo that went around or something like that. And I don't know if any of you guys seen Simple Nomad, but he's not the kind of